The lonely chapters. What is it? How will you know if God's leading you into that season or if you're in that season already? And what does the Bible have to say about the lonely chapters? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode. In the previous part 1 of this series, I explained my journey through some lonely chapters that God used to start this ministry right here, AGW Ministries. I was a pastor, went through some hard things, had to leave the safety net of that church, and then transitioned out on my own. And God used that season to bring me here. But it never would have been possible without going through a couple of years of struggle, of figuring things out alone, of maturing through that painful, lonely season. So, what is it? I didn't really unpack the lonely season too much in the last video, so I want to be more specific. Basically, the lonely chapters of someone's life are two things. First, it's a transition period. It's whenever you want to go from one season to another season, usually you have to go through a lonely chapter because we want to receive the new so we can leave the old, but that's not how it usually works. To receive something new, you often have to let go of what you had. And you have to go through a period of development, of traveling forward so that you can then be ready and develop. It's a transition period not only of time, but of character. You're not who you were, so you no longer fit in that old phase of life, but you're also not who you are going to be. And so you're not yet ready to fit with the new people God may have for you. So it's a period of transition. It's also a choice. Most people turn back. It's a choice of, am I going to go back to my old way or am I going to move forward into what God has for me? Most people experience the pain, not of trying and failing, but the pain of looking back knowing that you failed to try at all. And that ends up being a lot more painful than stepping out and trying. The regret is immense when you don't push through the lonely chapters. Most people go back to the devils they know and they die there because they're afraid of the devils they might meet and have to fight if they go out into the unknown. And that's why most people don't get to experience the life, love, and legacy that they want in life. And so it's a choice. Am I going to leave the old and take a risk and step out with God? And you push through the loneliness, you push through the unknowns, the fears, the new things that are uncomfortable, instead of going back to the old. So how will you know if you need a lonely chapter? The first question you want to ask yourself is, what do I want? And then you have to examine your life and say, am I on the road that leads me to what I want? If there's a discrepancy there, if you're saying, no, I am not on the road that leads me to where I want to go, that usually means you have to leave that old life and transition to a new life. And before you receive the new, you have to often go through that chapter of loneliness where you're finding and developing yourself so you'll be ready for the people that you will match with once you've developed enough. What are some biblical examples? Is this just something I came up with? Well, it's not something I just came up with. I've heard other people talk about it, but I've never heard it explained from a biblical perspective. And when I read the scriptures, I think God does use the lonely chapters to bless his people. A couple examples are Moses. Moses, you remember, was raised in Egypt by Pharaoh's daughter. And he, as a young man, he had a passion to see Israel freed. But he wasn't mature enough. He wasn't ready to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. So God had to lead Moses out of Egypt first. He had to have his own 40 years of wandering with God before he was ready to come back and lead the Israelites into their 40 years of traveling to the promised land. Also, I think it's worth noting that Moses didn't wait for someone to go with him. He just left. He just went. And that's a really crucial part of the lonely chapters, because if you're waiting for someone to go with you, you often never meet the people God has for you. Because the way it usually works is you end up meeting the people who have also left. And on the journey, you meet each other. But if you never leave, those people who are ahead of you aren't coming back for you. You have to go up to where they are. The people in the past, the people who want to keep you down, they'll always be there, and they'll be happy to keep you there if you're willing to stay with them. So you just have to start. You just have to go. And you will be alone. That's why it's called the lonely chapters. But it's not called the lonely life. This is a season. This is a journey so that you are then ready to have the community or the relationship or the marriage or the business or the ministry that you desire. Moses, for example, on his exit to Midian, met important people that God used to bless him. His wife Zipporah, his father Jethro, both of whom were extremely important for his ministry going forward when he was ready to lead Israel out of Egypt. Another biblical example is David. Before David was ready to be the king of Judah and Israel, he had to be chased by Saul into the caves. He was alone. He had to run from his enemies. And on the journey, God brought him fellow warriors. God brought him companions that he would grow with. And through that season of loneliness and running and fighting enemies, God developed him to be the king that he would eventually be. Think of Joseph. Joseph, before he was ready to be used by God to save many during the famine, God let his brothers betray him. He let Joseph be sold into slavery. He let Joseph serve in Potiphar's household and then in a prison, and then to be chosen by Pharaoh to be his second in command. And then God brought his family back so he could actually help his family like he wanted to do in the first place. Think of Mary. Before she was celebrated as the virgin chosen by God to give birth to Jesus, as we celebrate her now, she showed up pregnant. She showed up with all kinds of questions around her. People were talking, people were whispering, surely. Joseph, it said he was a righteous man, so he was going to divorce her quietly. Clearly, people knew about what was happening, and it was extremely painful for Mary to be questioned in that way. And so she had to go through that before she got the blessings. Joseph was given a confirmation from God that Mary was trustworthy. This was the Holy Spirit. She got to go visit Elizabeth and be comforted by her. And then she got to see the work of Jesus produce the church so we all could have the community we desire. The point is, all of these people and many more in Scripture had to go through the lonely chapters to receive the blessing that they wanted. So, you may ask, why does God make me go through something painful like that though? Aren't we made for community? Aren't we made for marriage, some of us who are called to that? Aren't we in need of a purpose? Why do we have to go through this phase? There is purpose in it. And I believe that there's at least four. There's more, we could talk about more, but there's at least 4 reasons God allows us to go through these lonely chapters. The first reason is that the journey leads to the destination. I won't belabor this point too much because it relates to what I've talked about already, but essentially, to get to where you need to go, you have to start alone. That's one of the main reasons God makes us go through the lonely chapters. It's a time of development and character building that prepares us to be the person who will fit with the spouse, with the community, with the business, with the ministry that God has for us. The second reason that God makes us go through the lonely chapters is that if we don't get rid of the old, it will contaminate the new. Imagine if you were given the spouse that you long for, but you have not yet removed the old relationships, the old toxic behaviors, the patterns in your life that are leading you into sin or not helping you walk with God. Imagine if those were still there when God gave you this person that He has planned for you. It would corrupt it. It's like what Paul says, a little leaven spreads throughout the whole loaf, and it contaminates our life. So we need to go through this detox phase, so to speak. We could also, the lonely chapters is a good phrase, I think, but it could also be called a detox phase of life, chapters of life, where we're letting go of that old so that we can receive the new. The third reason is that it produces faith. Not only do these lonely chapters cause the loneliness, but it also is a fearful, scary time, because the risks you're taking might not produce the results that you are hoping for. What if not going to the bar like you have been and missing out on all that fellowship or friendship and socializing is probably the better word? What if that doesn't result in you meeting a godly person? What if not hanging out with your family and friends on the weekends and choosing to work extra, even though you already work 40 hours a week, and you're choosing to use the weekends to work on your passion or this business that you want to get started or this ministry you want to get started? What if it doesn't work? What if the sacrifices don't pay off to the successes that you desire? And so that's what faith is. Faith is not about seeing the future. Faith is about trusting God even when you don't know the future. It's about walking forward into God's will for you, even when you don't know what that will is. That's what real faith is. And so it's a time of building your faith. Lastly, the lonely chapters benefit us, number 4, because they teach us that we're never really alone. God is the one we need most. And even when God gives you the one, the spouse you want, the business you want, the church you want, if you're not putting Christ above all of that, we ruin it. We contaminate it with idolatry. We smother it because we want it to give us something that it was never designed for us to receive from it. We need God most of all. And so the lonely chapters prepare your heart, knowing that you're never truly alone and that you have the love of Christ, which is what we need most.